In my last video, I summarized the story of the African slavery as a way of introduction, and I mentioned a few countries that invaded us. Hundreds of thousands of sailors were trooping into African coasts. They established ports, camps, and outposts there, and they were buying our brothers and sisters and taking them away. Our own leaders and our fathers were the ones selling us to them in exchange for firearms, tobacco, corn, and sugar, using a system known as trade by barter. Our people were very primitive then, walking around naked, so receiving clothes was a big deal. And if you own a gun then, you would be regarded as a strong warrior. And una maluguna kama ị ga-awọ okenye ba anyị ụtaba, wụọ ya nni. Ndị mmadụ wee bido na-efusisi ka ọkụkọ. Kidnapping became the order of the day. If you offend your father, he will sell you off. If you argue with a friend or a village head, he will target your family, kidnap all of them and sell them off. Onye pụba ọdọ ụmụ ya aka na ntị. Do not open the door. Do not go anywhere to avoid getting lost. Many stubborn children got lost. In fact, you don't even need to go out sometimes to get lost because they were even invading people in their homes. Pregnant women and young girls who turned down sex advances from touts were all kidnapped and sold off just to hurt them. Many pregnant women who got kidnapped spent many months on the floor, wooden floor of the ships. And majority of them did not survive the ordeal. They died and were just thrown into the sea. The strong women who made it gave birth in terrible conditions. And of course, their babies became slaves automatically. Some of these slave babies were fed to animals. Most of the babies born to slaves were snatched away from their mothers just to allow their mothers to be free to work at the plantations. Convicted criminals were just sold off by the village heads into slavery. And these slaves were used for rituals and sacrifices, especially those that passed through the colonies in Cameroon. In subsequent episodes, I will tell you how African slavery was twisted and turned into the story of the Israelites in Egypt. Because there is no history of Israel ever being held in Egypt as captive at no time at all in the history of the world. The whites valued the lives of their pets and other animals more than they valued the lives of African slaves. Our African brothers and sisters saw hell in those cargo ships that were specifically constructed for slave voyages. Millions of them died even before they got to their final destinations. I am going to play to you a simulated video of how this journey went. This will give you a little clue of what I'm talking about.
In 1867, more than 40,000 voyages set sail from Africa to the Americas, crammed with 12.5 million unwilling migrants who had been sold into slavery in exchange for European trade goods. A set of complete plans has survived for just one of these ships. The ship was the Aurore, which left La Rochelle in France on August 28, 1784, bound for the African coast. The captives it obtained there were taken to Saint-Domingue, now Haiti, in the Caribbean, and sold to the owners of sugar and coffee plantations. We close in just before the ship arrives on the African coast to get a clear view of the conditions that approximately 600 captives had to endure on their 2-month middle passage to the Caribbean. The Aurore was a typical 18th century slave ship, The main deck shows two key features designed to control the male slaves. First, the barricado, a 9-foot high wooden wall that divided the ship in two. This was topped with spikes and swivel guns. Second, two iron chains can be seen running along the upper deck. Every morning, the crew brought the shackled male captives up onto the deck from the spaces they had slept in overnight. The crew locked the main shackles into the chain to restrict movement. African men were not only chained in place, but continually within the firing line of the swivel guns. African women and children were imprisoned behind the barricado, normally unshackled, where they could neither see the men nor speak to them. Fearful that the male captives might escape their chains and try to capture the ship, the majority of the crew also remained behind the barricado. We descend from the quarterdeck to the officers' quarters and galley. A cook prepared the slaves' food in this boiler. The captives' diet consisted mainly of a starch such as rice, beans, or flour. Enslaved people were forced to eat this monotonous diet twice a day. They drank just 2 pints of water daily, leading to constant and often deadly dehydration. As the sun began to set, the crew, armed with whips and guns, forced the slaves below deck. The space below was divided by wooden walls to keep the men and women separated. The men were released from the deck chains and forced below, still shackled in pairs. Once below deck, crewmen packed the enslaved men together. Some were forced to lie on top of the platforms around the side of the room. Others lay under the platforms. Each captive, on or under a platform, slept in a space just 14 to 18 inches wide and 30 inches high. Most were forced onto their sides and pressed against their neighbors. Others sat in their meager, intervening spaces. The Aurores prisoners spent at least 14 hours in such cramped, dirty, and stifling conditions which they endured daily for 2 or 3 months before reaching the Caribbean. We have no contemporary depictions of the Aurore's 600 captives as the vessel left Malimba to cross the Atlantic Ocean. We do, however, have an image of a crammed lower slave deck painted on a voyage of a smaller slaver, the Marie Seraphique, from just a few years earlier. This comes into view in an overlay as the camera zooms out. The overlay shows only 340 captives, while the Aurore carried almost twice this number.
In my next video, I will tell you what happened to the slaves after they were sold.